I'm opening the Council Bluffs Board of Directors public hearing. Let the record show that all board members are present except for Mr. Kazire. The Council Bluffs Community School District is holding, and Dr. Jill Gress. Council Bluffs Community School District is holding a public hearing on the 2019-2020 certified annual budget. Dr. Murillo will lead us in that discussion. After the presentation, there will be time for the school board members to ask questions, and then time for anyone in the audience who would like to have any questions for the board. We will not make any action on the budget at the public hearing, but we will take action following the public hearing at our regular business meeting. So, Dr. Murillo?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. LaFerla. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Wilson to join me at the podium. He's going to walk us through the proposed certified budget for the 2019-2020 school year. Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. I'm partnering with my friend, Mr. Fringer back there, so we'll be moving through the slides here. The 1920 budget presented us some challenges this year. We received, school districts received a supplemental aid of 2.06%. However, that is all based on enrollment. We had a decrease in enrollment of roughly 70 students. And because of that, and coming off the budget guarantee for the prior year, we actually were receiving a reduction in state aid for our district of $125,000 compared to last year. So the decrease in enrollment and the reduction in state aid is obviously a challenge that we're trying to overcome. Increase in wages and benefit costs are estimated to be $1.1 million. We do anticipate an increase in transportation costs of $540,000. That is from $150,000 for our new 3-year contract and $390,000 to transport students from the Kern area over to the Madison campus. We also did set aside a contingency for costs for an increase in fixed costs such as utilities, maintenance, things of those natures that we don't know how much they're going to go up, so we put that in kind of as a placeholder there. 31.5% of all Iowa districts received 0 or less funding in 1920 than compared to 1819. This next graph that you're seeing is a graph of state aid, supplemental state aid from 1974 through the next year, and you can obviously see there's a definite trend line down in the percent of state aid that the state of Iowa is giving to school districts as a whole. This is considered new money, and this is used for non-specific, go back to that one if you would, Dave. This is used for non-specific areas, so this is not specifically used for grant or special ed. This is just for general operations, wage increases, increases in other costs, etc. The state claims they're spending more on education, but many of the increases are tied to specific programs. 2 examples is we receive about $3 million for TLC funds a year, which is the Teacher Leadership Grant. Those can only be used for that grant, and we cannot use it for anything else. Also, the increases of student transportation has been announced for districts around Iowa, but because we're below the average, we will not be participating in that. So although they're giving more money to schools, it can be hit and miss in terms of how much money districts do receive in a given year. The next slide is the certified enrollment trend. And you can see that except for an anomaly in the 17-18 year, we went up 130 students, but we decreased the following year the same number. What we're hoping is what we do is when we calculate the certified budget, we use the enrollment from the prior October. So what the prior October showed was an enrollment, a certified enrollment, which is a weighted enrollment of 9,056 students that we're using for our budget for the 1920 year. We won't know until October of this year what our enrollment will be. However, what we're hoping is that we have a small senior class leaving, and we're hoping that a kindergarten class coming in will be larger to maybe show an increase in the next year. We'll have to wait and see. This is the next graph is a property tax levy graph showing what the levy was from 2009-10 all the way through next year. Now, the reason you see the spike in the 11-12 years, that was the year where we had a big drop in fund balance because of the recession that hit. The state had cut state aid 10% across the board, and we had to participate in that. But normally, when you look at that range, we're trying to keep it within a tight range so that we don't burden the taxpayers any more than we have to. We're proposing a reduced levy rate of 19 cents from the 18-19 year, which is about a $15 savings on a $150,000 home. And this levy that we have of 1705 does include 49 cents for the debt service levy for the GO bond that was passed by the taxpayers in earlier last year. Unspent authority, this is perhaps the most important metric school districts use. The suggested range is between 7 and 10% of unspent authority. Due to lack of state funding and anticipated cost increases, we're projecting that at the end of this year will be about 7.4%, down from about 8.4%, and that the projected 19-20 budget that we're looking at will drop further to about 6.6%. That is slightly lower than the range that we'd like to be in. The ISB suggests a range of 5 to 10. We want to make it a little bit higher, but we're still in a decent range. An increase in the levy will not increase our spending authority. And the reason is because any increases in the levy is done with cash, and cash is not considered spending authority by the state of Iowa. The next slide, and I apologize, this is a little hard to read. This is the components. It breaks it down between the general fund, management fund, PEPAL fund, and the debt service fund of how much in property tax money is going to each one of those categories. The overall rate, which is the levy rate in column 3 there, is 1705,122. As I said, that's down roughly 19 cents from the current year. And the management fund, the PEPAL fund, and the debt service fund are all included in that rate. So it's an all-inclusive rate. What we try to do is match our expenditures with our with the revenue coming in, and this is the proposal that we've come up with for this. Property taxes, valuation in the Pottawatomie County in our district alone is about $2.3 billion. So that's the levy that's the valuation we're looking at for the levy, which is slightly increased from last year. So with that, I will ask the board if they have any discussion questions for me at this time.
Any questions from the board?
Just a comment. You must be a musician. Pass a bond issue and the rate goes down. You can always guarantee that?
It's not me. The reason it went down is because we were on the 1%. We were on the 1% guarantee for this year, which is funded by property tax. You only get that though for 1 year, so we went
So
off
that
of
went
that.
off.
And that's why, because when I first looked at that, I said, "There's no way this rate's going down like this. What's going on?" That was the reason.
That's good news anyway.
It's good news. It's good news.
Taxpayers should remember that in coming
Yes.
years maybe, huh?
Any other questions? Are there any members of the public who wish to address the board? Seeing none, I will close this public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Now call to order the regular business meeting of the Council Bluffs Community School District Board of Directors. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Grove,
Present.
Mr. Minshaw,
Present.
Mr. McGlade,
Present.
Mr. Arthur,
Present.
Mr. LaFurla.
Present. And now, please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we have a approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I'll move approval of the agenda.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or changes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? And the motion carries. Now we have approval of the minutes from the work session and workshop meetings of March 12th, 2019. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I can move approval of the work session and regular meeting minutes in the packet.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the work session and workshop meeting minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. At this time, we have come to the public participation portion of our agenda. If there are any members of the public who wish to address the board on any item as on the agenda or other matters of concern, please approach the podium now. Seeing none, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Murillo.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask Ms. Ostrowski to join me at the podium. We have some celebrations tonight and some incredible students to recognize. So, Ms. Ostrowski, the floor is yours.
Great, and good evening.
Good evening.
We have invited here tonight, as Dr. Murillo said, some special high school students who have demonstrated super performance on the ACT. As you know, the ACT is taken by most high school students as a measure of their college readiness. A perfect score means that they are at a score of 36 ready for college and to be successful. So we're going to introduce you to 4 Abraham Lincoln High School seniors who have achieved on at least one subtest that perfect score, and we're very proud of them and want to celebrate them and their parents here this evening. So as I call their name, please, if you would, come forward and allow Dr. Murillo to greet you and present you with our Student Star Award, and we'll take a picture. Okay. Darren Baker, his perfect score was in reading. Congratulations, Darren. Caleb Fitch, also in reading. Ethan Jensen in English. And Sam Killian in science. Mr. LaFurla, would you join in the photo? And parents, feel free to come on up and take a close-up. He's pretty bossy, isn't he? That's worth celebrating, commemorating, so. Thank you. As the students return, would the parents please stand and allow us to recognize you as well? Okay. As is our tradition, and we don't have 6 this month, but we do have 2 outstanding staff members to celebrate. No snow days to hold us up on this one. We are excited that our Council Bluffs Schools Foundation partners with us to have a student recognition program as well as a staff recognition program. So thanks to Mr. LaFurla and the Council Bluffs Schools Foundation. Our licensed staff member of the month for February is Dylan Wolf from Longfellow. Welcome to the podium, Dylan. We'll share some information about you. So Dylan teaches fourth grade at Longfellow, and we'll share with you what your nominators shared. Dylan has many strengths in all areas, but he's known for being dedicated and driven. He's a teammate, a colleague, an asset, and a leader of school spirit at Longfellow. For example, in support of student council, he enhances the students' school experience by helping them meet up with a veteran, pack care packages for deployed troops, taking the trip to the recycling center, singing Christmas carols at the retirement community, and collecting over 1,000 goods for local pantries. Dylan's always an active participant in school spirit dress-up days, which brightens the spirits of students and staff. And he does a tremendous job of teaching students not only academics, but helping them solve problems for the real world. He has fun with his students while showing great empathy for them. Dylan is extremely deserving for his hard work and dedication in improving the lives of others. Congratulations, Dylan. Yeah. And Dylan has a fan club here tonight of many family members as well as principals present and past. So congratulations to all of you. Sure. Yep. All right. Our support staff member of the month is Mary Fletcher from Hoover Elementary. Mary. Mary is the media clerk at Hoover Elementary. Her nominator shared that she continuously tracks the library circulation and creates new and engaging ways to increase the number of students who visit the library and the number of books that they check out. Mary creates monthly displays, I'm sure they're fabulous, of books to help promote different topics and themes that will interest them. Mary promotes technology integration as students visit and engage with library materials. The most recent project she has implemented is the Stick Together campaign. This is fun. So this is where she has a giant dot puzzle displayed at the checkout counter. Every time a student checks out a book, they're given a sticker to add to the puzzle. As more stickers are added, an image becomes visible. Over 4,000 books will need to be checked out to complete the puzzle. Are you close? Oh, it's been finished. That's okay. So were the kids excited to see what picture it made? And what was it, Mary? A tiger. Oh, I love it. So Mary is supporting the love of literacy at Hoover and positively impacting reading achievement at Hoover. Congratulations to Mary. Yes. Mr. LaFurla? And also she is joined here tonight by Hoover principals and present and past and her Hoover school fans. And you're all welcome to go take pictures. Good. We have a special out of the ordinary award to give this evening, and that is a special award to recognize one of our leaders who is not only recognized locally for her achievements, but also at the state level. Ms. Carrie Newman, our Kern Middle School principal, as you know, was named the School Administrators of Iowa Middle Level Administrator of the Year, and we wanted to recognize her tonight.
And that completes our report.
Okay, thank you, and thank you to the students and staff for being such outstanding representatives of our district. Now we've come to the resolutions portion of our agenda. First, we have a second reading of policies. Is there a motion?
Move the board approves the second reading of the policies as presented.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I know there was some question during this, we were gonna go back to legal and seek some advice, yeah.
Yes, and that policy we have pulled for us to
Yes.
have at the next workshop
Oh,
Okay.
for discussion.
Okay.
So we will have that at the workshop meeting the 1st of April, and then we will submit it at the
Okay.
last of April after discussion has been held.
sounds good.
And I guess just for public knowledge, I was going to read the policies, but hold on. We're voting on the second reading of policies 203 Board of Directors Annual Meeting, 204 Board of Directors Organizational Meeting and Election of Officers in School Election Years, Board of Directors Officers, President and Vice President, Board of Directors Secretary Treasurer, Board of Directors Superintendent Operating Principals, Public Attendance and Participation at Board of Directors Meetings, Board of Directors Review of Administrative Regulations, and then a Policy Dissemination Policy. Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. Did you have a question? Okay. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes. And the motion carries. Next, we have a resolution for purchase of WonderWorks instructional materials. Is there a motion?
Yeah. I would move that the board of directors approve the purchase of Reading WonderWorks K through 5 instructional material for use in special education.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I assume we're happy with this program, huh? That's why we're expanding it to special ed. Good.
Now, can I add, is this what's replacing what used to be like the intervention strategy? Or, okay.
This is
Thank
on
you, Dr.
core,
Borthman.
and so Dr. Worthman can explain why we're pushing this out to
Okay.
special ed now.
Yeah, so we adopted the Wonders materials in 2017, starting in 2017-18 for core classes in grades K through 6. After we adopted those materials, we had an opportunity to pilot some of the materials that are for students with special needs. And so for the past year and a half, we've had multiple pilot groups at multiple grade levels, working with special education teachers to identify if this program could show significant instructional achievement gains, and it has. And it also has been very popular with teachers in terms of ease of use, and they've seen a lot of success because it mirrors the core program. So students with special needs who may be behind their peers are able to access the material in their regular classroom because much of it gets pre-taught the day before. So they're actually able to participate fully in the regular classroom and have a more engaging experience in core. And it showed gains on the rapid assessment when we gave pre and post measures. So it will be used in K-5 reading. It will replace at special ed the use of comprehensive intervention. Comprehensive intervention model will still be used for general education students in Tier 2 next year. So this is for special ed students with IEPs and reading goals.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, the motion carries. Next, we have an approval for consultation services for implementation of WonderWorks reading. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I will move to approve the consultation proposal with Collaborative Consulting LLC.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next, we have a approval of the 2019-2020 certified budget with the proposed property tax levy. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the 2019-2020 budget with a tax levy of $17.05122.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No discussion. There's a motion and a second. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, the motion carries. Next, we have approval of the Abraham Lincoln High School visitor parking lot contractor. Is there a motion?
Yes. I would move to award Bluss Paving and Utility Company of Crescent, Iowa, the contract for the Abraham Lincoln High School visitor parking lot, bid number 19-004, in the amount of $103,548.36.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Is this the second of three parts?
Middle.
This one that
Yes,
you're
this
talking
is-
about right now is the visitors parking. We are, in the presentation, this would be the parking that we're moving down and adding some additional space where the grass area is as you pull into the parking lot. The next board item is phase two, or the second, doing the middle piece of the full parking lot. Remember, they started up by the courts, then they're coming down. This was an add-in, Mr. Groves, because of loss of some parking. Due to our trade works that is going up in the back, we're having to add some additional parking in the front. And we were able to use that piece of land that we have there.
Does this include replacing what's right there in the main entrance right now?
It will not do the first phase, as you pull in, is that what you're talking about? Yes, that will be the last phase we'll do next year.
It's terrible shape.
It is. Stacy and I met today. She's going to look to see what they can do to kind of patch it until they get to that phase, but according to HGM and the engineering firm that they have there about moving down, we couldn't do the phases and move up because of the water. We need to start. So it's another year. They can only complete one phase in a summer.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, but it is in bad shape. That's what I
I
told
was
them.
just thinking you can't do that first and do the middle last. That's what you're saying, no, huh? Well, it's a terrible impression right now. You just gotta live with it for another year, is what you're saying.
Yes, she's gonna have to figure out some type of patching for us until we can get to it, because I don't think it'll make it a full year, some of those areas.
And then this is the same company that did the first phase, correct?
But they were very pleased with.
Did notice it says their bids keep coming in under the estimate.
Any other discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes,
and Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next, we have approval of the contractor for Abraham Lincoln High School student parking lot. Is there a motion?
I move that we award Bluss Paving Utility Company of Crescent, Iowa, the contract for the Abraham Lincoln High School visitor parking lot, bid number 19-004, in the amount, nope, that'd be the wrong one.
100,000.
That was weird. Phase two bid 19-005 in the amount of $408,683.68, and alternate one of $10,020.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next, we have approval of plan specifications and form of contract for Kern Middle School project, which were reviewed at the last board meeting. Is there a motion?
Yeah, so moved.
We have a motion, there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Everybody involved was happy with the plans. Did parents have some input on this? or-
We held at least a couple of meetings with parents. We held a couple of meetings with staff. Our principal was involved all the way through, and Dr. Borthman included all of our staff members that lead or coordinate or direct any and extracurricular activities to weigh in and make sure our specs met. And then we also had a core team that worked with BVH for several months. And as we had upgrades, we kept taking it back to the larger group for input and consensus.
Great.
Any other discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next, we have approval of 2019 E-rate Category 2 bid approval for data switches and power supplies. Is there a motion?
I'll move we accept the bid from AOS Verge 1 for Category 2E, rate eligible data switches and uninterruptible power supplies in the amount of $372,786.15. A district out-of-pocket cost of $55,917 after the E-rate discount.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
This is just amazing. We get that much value and we only pay 55,000? And that's what we pay on our phone bill? Is that what that's all about? Where's that money come from? This non-technology guy here, this E-rate stuff.
It's your money, Bill.
Yeah, no doubt.
Both cellular and traditional landline or plain old telephone service lines carry small surcharges which amount to pennies or nickels on bills, but those pennies or nickels add up to millions of dollars, which are used for schools and libraries to provide internet connectivity and also most recently these wide area network projects inside of schools. And our school district does have a very healthy discount, typically between 75 and 85%. So
Wonderful.
it's fabulous. And this is a situation where we'll only buy this equipment if our E-rate applications are approved. If for some reason they wouldn't be, we don't have the money to spend. So
So this is a perfect example of all of us paying pennies on our bill and the district reaps this kind of benefit.
for schools and libraries, that's true.
Yeah, wonderful.
Any other discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next, we have a resolution authorizing the district to seek bids on general obligation bond. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move the Council of Board of Directors authorizes the resolution ratifying, confirming, and approving publication of notice of sale of not to exceed $27,500,000 general obligation school bonds, Series 2019, approving electronic bidding procedures and approving official statement.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion?
Great rate. Yeah, 3.122. All in, yeah, wow. phenomenal and straight.
And I think we should thank our taxpayers in the school district again for approving that bond issue. This is huge.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes,
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now we have a resolution authorizing reimbursement for general obligation bonds. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I can also move that. Board of Directors, I move the Board of Directors of Council Bluffs Community School District declare an official intent under Treasury Regulation 1.150-2 to issue debt to reimburse the school district for certain original expenditures paid in connection with specified projects.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
And yeah, so folks know this allows us to reimburse ourselves for costs we already put in.
Incurred.
Correct.
Anything else? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
yes,
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now we have a resolution directing the sale of $27,500,000 general obligation bond, Series 2019. Is there a motion?
Yeah, so I would move to be it resolved, the Board of Directors of the Council Bluffs Community School District directs the sale of $27,500,000 of general obligation school bonds, Series 2019.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion?
You know, there's great footnotes in this. So there'll be a second tranche of these in 2020 for $9.5 million.
Correct.
Good for folks to know.
Any other discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
yes,
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now we have approval of, excuse me, new job descriptions. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I would move that the Board of Directors approve the new job descriptions as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion?
I guess just to touch on what this is, I mean, I looked at it, but it's, so we passed we didn't pass, we submitted a grant for more funding for preschool, and these would only be going into effect if
If the
that is
grant's
successful.
received, yes. These are required positions by the Head Start, and to receive that funding from the federal government. And we hope to know if we are awarded the grant by the 1st of April. And this is anticipation that we will receive, and once we receive, we'll be ready just to roll.
Any other questions? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
yes,
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now we have a resolution for a contract with First Student for busing services. Is there a motion?
I move we approve 3-year contract extension with First Student Transportation Services for the school years 2020 to 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
did we have any other bidders?
No, this wasn't a bid, it was an extension of the current contract.
Ah. Okay,
Are there any other providers that can even meet the need for?
There are other providers, there's national companies, Durham is one, and Student Transportation of America. What our consultant, if you remember, Dr. Bruckner hired a couple of years ago a consultant to come in, we talked about this, and he had stated at the time, and I think Dr. Murillo would echo this from her experiences, that when you send a student transportation bid out, you're actually going to pay a lot more than just extending the current contract.
We experienced that in my prior district, and so my decision to kind of guide Mr. Wilson this way especially with the opening of Madison and needing to extend the routes and wanting to stay with a company that already knew our district. We would almost be a little bit farther behind, and we need the opening of school next year to be seamless with the Madison campus. And we really felt like First Student came to the table, was fair, and did a really good job negotiating the new contract with us.
Are they gonna have to hire more drivers?
7 buses is what we're adding. Yes.
And Tim Hamilton did a great job negotiating with them and getting them down to 7. At first they had 13 and he worked them over and got it down to 7, so.
And they also allowed us to have a clause that if we have students that don't take advantage, right now, we're planning to bus everyone. If we find that we have students that don't take advantage of transportation and the parents still want to drive them, and we can reduce, they will allow us to reduce the number of buses to save even more.
Good planning.
Any other discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion to approve the contract extension passes. Now we have a consulting agreement for grant application support. Is there a motion?
I would move to approve the agreement with Hassel Consulting as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion?
Didn't we use them before?
We use the ASIL consulting services to help us with the Head Start grant. What we wanted to just get in place was a kind of a contract that shows that we use her for multiple, so that the board would be aware that we're going to use her for more than one, because we don't have internal grant writers. And Julie, Ms. ASIL, her company writes grants for multiple districts across U.S. and has great connections. She is housed in Kansas City. I used her for many grants, and we were very successful. And just her knowledge base and her support staff to assist and write. And I know that she really was instrumental in helping us get that grant done and on time, and also working with Tim and supporting him and Dave with the security grant we've submitted. So we've kind of moved into a new space here, kind of shifted some, where we're going after every grant dollar that we can access. I think it's really critical that we reach out and we get those dollars that are on the table that can help our district. So we will need that additional support, and I just want to be real transparent with the board and our community that we're using a consulting service to help us get those grants written and submitted, and that they're of high quality.
So you've used her one time already?
Yes, we used her for the Head Start grant. She currently is helping Dave and Tim on a couple of other areas, 21st Century and our security grant, correct? Mm-hmm.
Great.
Any other questions? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now we have a resolution to set a public hearing for extension of the instructional support levy. Is there a motion?
I move to direct the board secretary to set a public hearing on April 23rd, 2019, regarding an extension of the instructional support levy.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
This won't affect the current budget, it'll be the following year.
Actually, this will be to extend it from 2022 to 2027.
Oh, so we're a few years early.
Yes. The attorneys recommended that you do it as early as you can. So did ISB.
Okay.
And then, this just extends it for 5 years, correct? Yep.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur? Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the motion carries. Now we have approval of the consent agenda, which contains items including NWEA map assessment renewal, approval of IB budgets at Kern and Wilson Middle Schools, special education contracts with Clarinda Community School District, College Community School District, and Boys Town National Research Hospital, the personnel agenda, and financial statements and purchases. Is there a motion?
I will move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, and the consent agenda passes, and that concludes our business, and this meeting is adjourned.
Great job, Mr. VP.